back to The Remote Life. My name is Han Talbot, also known as Han Meets World, and today we'll be chatting with Rebecca Hawkes. Originally from the UK, Rebecca is a confidence and life coach, as well as the host of the Confidence Show podcast. She supports her clients in creating more self-confidence, empowering them to follow their desires, and helping them to become fearless in all that they do so they can live the life they truly desire. In this episode, we talk about building a lifestyle and business that works for you, having the freedom to tweak your business over time, and the empowerment that a remote business can provide in our day-to-day. So grab a coffee, a tea, or something stronger, and let's get started. Well, Rebecca, welcome to the Remote Life podcast.
Hi, I'm good, thank you. It's so nice to be here and to speak to you after such a while.
I know, we keep doing this thing, although we're like, oh yeah, let's not leave it this long, and then it's been another couple years.
Every time.
But I keep seeing what you're up to on social media, so it's kind of like, was it really 2 years? It's crazy. And I feel like we kind of need to preface this podcast a little bit, just to give some more context for people. Basically, so Becca and I met when we were both invited to, it was 2017, we were both invited to, I can't even find the name, but I know that like the Financial Times did a piece on it at one point about female entrepreneur business spaces and stuff that were starting to appear. And basically, yeah, we've been invited to go check out this space in East Hackney, was it? And just co-work for a day. And I think there was, 4 of us at the time. And yeah, we just kind of got chatting. And I love the fact that I was surrounded by women who were running their own businesses. And there I was, where I'd just got permission from the people I was working with. And they still called me in the middle of the day to check I was working. And I thought, oh my God, this is so embarrassing, like amongst all these amazing entrepreneurial women remotely working.
No, not at all. I remember that though. I remember you telling me about it and being like, oh, I really want to go like remote full time. And I was literally just starting my business as well. So I think it's funny how we all, because I do that as well. I look at other people running their business and I'm like, oh my God, they're so far ahead of me. And to be honest, like most people are just in the same boat. So I don't think there is that oh, they're doing so much better than me kind of thing.
I wanted to chat also because you were also such a huge help and like a big support. I don't know if you really realise this, but you were such an amazing support for me as well when I went freelance in 2019. I remember I think we met up at Second Home in Shoreditch, and you were just giving me all this amazing advice for being freelance as well. And I remember being so panicky at the beginning of the road, like this big daunting new chapter was in front of me, and it just sent me down memory lane seeing that photo and then thinking about it and where we are now. So yeah, like before we get into more of your story, like, 'cause obviously I want people to get to know you and your amazing journey. What was it that really drew you to remote specific lifestyle?
Firstly, thank you for saying that, because I didn't have any idea that was helpful. So thank you for saying that. I firstly wanted to get into remote work because I'd travelled. So between 21 and 24, I'd lived in Thailand for a year and I'd lived in Australia for 2 years, like on and off, and came back to the UK and knew that I was going to be going abroad again with my boyfriend at the time. And I knew that I didn't want to go back to like a local bar job. Like I wanted to do something for myself. And I really was like, this is my opportunity to start something that I can literally take anywhere in the world. Like I knew I didn't want to settle in England for a long time. I knew I didn't want a 9-to-5. And my experience in social media and in marketing at my previous company, and the fact that I just was obsessed with it, I was like, this is a real opportunity for me to do something different, do something creative, and do something that I'm excited about, so that I never have to stop this travel lifestyle. And like we obviously spoke a little bit before, and we'll probably speak about this more, that's changed over the years. But the desire to work for myself has never changed. Yes, there are times where I'm a bit like, life would be so much easier if I just clocked in and clocked out, because my brain never switches off. I'm constantly having ideas. I'm constantly looking at the ways that I can improve things or tweak things, or I want to start this and I want to try that. And it can be very intense because you never really get a break, but I love it. I'm such a creative person. I love the fact that I have so much variety in my life. I love that I can do whatever I want on a daily basis. I can go wherever I want on a daily basis. And I can really slot my work life around the things that are most important to me. I think that's the thing that's become most clear over the past few years, is it's not necessarily the jet setting and the traveling and the exploring new places. Like the most important thing is that ability to do whatever I want and slot it around the most important things. And yes, sometimes that is travel, sometimes that is going away. Other times it's things like supporting family members and being with my niece and nephew who have come along in the last couple of years. I love it and I would never change it.
I absolutely love that. I think that's exactly it. And I don't know about you, but I feel like more people have gone remote or have taken on the digital nomad lifestyle post-pandemic because of the pandemic. I feel like that shift really sort of helped bring it more into the mainstream, and people were a bit more accepting of it as a lifestyle after the pandemic because the majority were forced to do it. But it's so refreshing to be able to talk to somebody who was in that sort of take-off moment of remote working, because that was exactly it for me too. I think a lot of people, when they think, oh, you're a remote worker, it's because you want to go travel, you want to go to Bali and like work with your shoes like at the door. It's the kind of specific perception that people still have, I feel. Like coconuts and laptops on the beach. But I think people fail to realise that actually a lot of the whole remote lifestyle is about how you operate, and everything you were saying about, I do it because I wish I could clock in and out because that would be quote unquote easy. It's not, it really isn't that, because not all our minds are wired for that, right? That's not the point. I remember even when I was going, oh my God, I can't believe my manager is calling me in the middle of the day. And I was thinking, I got more work done during that co-working day we did than I did ever going into their central London office. Like, forget their internet was not great, but I remember thinking, no, this is proving my point. Obviously, I think it was during the period of unicorn emojis on the walls and everything being pink and whatnot, because we're going through that girl boss era. But it was still so much more somehow conducive to what I needed to get my work done. And I think that gets largely overlooked by a majority of people, even now.
I completely agree. And I think your environment impacts you so much, especially when you are a creative person. Like when you're somebody who's got a lot of ideas, if you are sat in the same boring space day in, day out, you don't have that space for your brain to get inspired or for you to think more outside the box, because you're looking at the same thing every single day. And I do it myself here. I work from home a lot now, but I have to get out and go to cafes or different workspaces, or even just go for a walk or do something to change my environment, to almost like put me in a different space where my brain can start to think differently. And I agree, like moving from that office, as you say, on that day, you do get so much done. And I think also being surrounded by other people that are working as well. And it's not like being in an office where everyone's working on their own stuff. You're in a space where everyone's working on something they're passionate about and they're excited about. And I don't know if this is just me, but you can almost feel like the creative energy and the passion coming off of other people. And when you see other people, like remote workers, specifically I'm talking about, when you can see how engrossed they are in their work and in flow they are and how excited they're getting about what they're doing, that fuels you as well. And I think that really comes from changing your environment and being somewhere different.
100%. All being in that same environment that lights you up. That's just, I can't believe that was 2017. That feels so, it feels like yesterday and so long ago.
I know.
Same time.
I know, oh my God.
Which I guess, to be honest, it kind of leads me into, so we talked about this a bit before the podcast, and it feels like such a dumb question to ask, but is there anything for you that has specifically changed, whether it's the perceptions of remote lifestyle, whether it's anything that's changed specifically for you around remote lifestyle since 2017?
I think it's all changed completely, to be perfectly honest. When I first started my business, I started out as a social media manager. I'm now a confidence coach, but that was very intentional because I wanted to live the laptop lifestyle. I wanted to spend my days at the beach. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to do all these things. And I had that for a few years. And then just before the pandemic, my relationship ended unexpectedly, and then the pandemic happened and I stayed in the UK. And since the pandemic, a lot of things has happened in my family life. So my brother got married and has had 2 kids. Third one's on the way this year, and my granddad's been very ill, and I also lost my dog last year. So a lot of stuff has happened in my personal life that has kind of kept me in the UK. I've wanted to be here because I want to see my niece and nephew grow up, and I help out with them on a weekly basis. I go to their activities with them to support my sister-in-law. My granddad, as I said, hadn't been well during the pandemic and isn't well now, really. And because I work for myself, because I work remotely, I get to be that support network for them. So I can take him to hospital appointments. I can go and visit them a few times a week. I can go and get their shopping. I can really be that person that they can lean on. And they, like, my grandparents mean the absolute world to me. Like, they have supported me throughout my entire life. They've always been my safe space. They've always been the ones that no matter what I can go to. And now, I mean, I'll never be able to repay them for what they've done, but I get to kind of try and pay that back in a little way. And if it wasn't for remote work, I wouldn't be able to do that. Everyone else around me is in a 9 to 5, apart from my sister-in-law, who's a stay-at-home mum. Everyone else around me is in a 9 to 5 and wouldn't be able to support them. I mean, my nan's sister's there, but she's also older as well. So it has changed for me, my perception of what it means to work remotely, and my priorities have changed at this point in my life. And I'm very open to that changing in the future. Like, I'm very open to continuing to work abroad in the future. But right now, that's just what's important to me, helping with my niece and nephew and baby number 3 when that one comes along, and really taking care of my granddad. And I think if I had never started my business all those years ago, I don't think I would have necessarily started a business thinking, oh, if I start this business, then I can support my family. I don't know if this makes me sound like a terrible person, but that would have not been a big enough intention for me to go, let's throw myself into the world of working on my own. Whereas initially it was the ability to travel the world, to, as I said, live that laptop lifestyle. And now, because I've spent years setting that up and setting my business up to the place it is, it's allowed me to evolve and change my priorities.
So it's funny, I was kind of getting a tiny bit emotional when you're talking about your family, because I was like, not enough people talk about it. I think the fact that it's not about not going into an office, it's about being there when times are good, but also when times are tough as well. It is so much more than not going into an office. I feel like priorities change, but also in 2017, for example, there weren't quite as many different ways to make money online. Yes, there were up and coming ways to make money online. I feel like now we have so many different ways to make money online, from TikTok to, like, you know, YouTube, all the ways that we've sort of known, but now there are way more platforms that can also allow people to prioritize family and their lifestyle and whatnot. I think it makes sense that those goals and those pillars also change over time, right? I was going to say the whole ability to travel while working, that's such a in your 20s sort of approach, whereas then those that goalposts may change over time as you sort of start to settle into the routine of having a business as well. So I think that makes total sense, and I love that you have brought up that, because it can change. We're humans. We're allowed to change over time.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I completely agree. And also, like, for me as well, like, at some stage I want to have my own kids. So I feel like the work that I'm doing and have been doing, by the time I have kids, I want to get to the point where the majority of my stuff is running itself. So I still have my online business that I can tap into a couple of hours a day, maybe, once I've got children, so that I still have that space where I get to be creative, where I get to support my clients, where I get to do the things that I love, that make me me, and that can support me and my future family. And I feel like that's another example of my priorities will change in the future, and I can see that happening in the future. I don't know how to word this, but I think it was definitely naive of me to expect that my entire business would just be my entire life, just jumping from country to country. As you say, when you're in your 20s, that's what you expect to do. And when I was in my 20s, I didn't have the family, I don't want to say responsibilities because that makes it sound like a burden, but like these family priorities that I want to put in place of other things. I didn't have those, and I had never factored those in. But now I'm just glad that that's the way it's kind of worked out.
I think that's growing up, isn't it?
Yes.
so like, but it is growing up, because if I think right back to in my early 20s, I had all the mental energy to be constantly 24/7. If I wasn't at my work, I was thinking about my blog, or I was thinking about like, reading a book. I was going to events and like burning the candle at both ends because you could, right? And then slowly that energy gets not sapped away, but the idea of even like fast travel just sort of makes me feel exhausted before I've even done it. I think it's just having that flexibility. It's the flexibility to be able to change, because I 100% agree. So pre-pandemic, I was half remote. And even then, knowing that I could, you know, drive to the hospital with my grandparents, or I could actually choose when I was in the city, it helped. Even though the contract I was doing was taking up a lot of my brain space, it still allowed me to be there for my family in the same way as well. So I completely empathise. It's having that flexibility and knowing that kind of you've got that peace of mind to be there if you want to.
I think choice is like so valuable, and I think we talk about wealth in terms of like money and finances and that kind of stuff, but I think choice is probably one of the biggest things that we can give ourselves, like giving ourselves the choice to take the day off to take a grandparent to the hospital, or like say I don't work most Thursdays because I help out with the kids swimming, and then we'll go to the park, and if I want to do some work in the afternoon I will, but I don't put that pressure on myself to work on Thursdays. And also one thing that I wanted to say there is it also gives you the flexibility and the time and space to take care of yourself, and I think that's really important. Like I'm someone that does need a lot of rest. So yeah, some days I can work for like 8-10 hour days, not very often, but maybe like once or twice a month I'll have this like day where I will just be so in flow I can't stop. But then there's a lot of time where I do just need a lot of rest. I'm someone that needs a lot of downtime. I love an afternoon nap. Like I need the time and space to take care of myself, and the more that I take care of myself, either by like going to the gym in the middle of the day, or just calling around my grandparents for a cup of tea in the afternoon, or like sleeping in, going to London because I just feel like it. All those things fill my cup up. And I think that's another benefit of working remotely, is that you do get to prioritize yourself. And obviously I know this is a luxury that we've kind of created for ourselves, but that's something that is so important for me, because I know that if I'm not looking after myself, I'm not useful to anyone around me. I'm not useful to myself. I'm not useful to my clients. I'm not useful to my family. It's something that I think is really, really important, and something that I definitely prioritize above pretty much everything else.
It's almost like we're living beings and not robots.
I know. What is this?
What do you mean sometimes we need a nap? Again, I have got to the point now where I think if I didn't have the option to have a nap on a day where I didn't sleep well for some reason, again, not sleeping very well over a travel day, or not even that, if I had a migraine like one day and then I had to take time to recover, even the process of like, I don't have to get up and put makeup on, or make sure my hair looks all right for going into the office. Am I wearing the appropriate colours for the office? Which was what was the actual thing for me at one point. The stress that's been taken off for those simple things is wild. And just being able to exactly take care of myself so that I can come back 10 times. It's that whole thing of put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others, right?
Yeah, 100%.
It really is quite 100%. I would say that I definitely, and not take for granted, but I definitely forget sometimes that it is a choice that active choice I've made, and an active privilege I get to be able to choose this. But yeah, I think that's often what gets put aside, is we are human beings. We have different needs in order to fulfill a job, in order to fulfill relationships, anything. And I know I've got to the point where I kind of forget that used to be a reality, where I was kind of at the mercy of someone else. Please tell me if this is too personal for me to ask, but as someone who has kind of got it in their minds and their goals that they want to have kids, do you think that you will probably stay put in the UK with the kids, or do you think you'll be nomadic?
When I was younger, I was very much like, I'm going to move to Thailand, I'm going to have my kids in Thailand, they are going to have the best life ever growing up on the beach, it's going to be incredible. But I think since seeing my brother and his wife have their kids here, and the amount of support that they receive, like they don't ask for help, but they've got her mum and dad, they've got my mum and dad and stepmom, they've got me, they've got grandparents, her sister. They receive so much support, and they always have someone there if they need to take the kids off their hands or just be involved with the kids. And I think, as I said, they're not people that necessarily need it or ask for it. I'm the person that will need it and will need to ask for it. Like I will absolutely, purely because I know my own mental health. Like I know I've suffered with anxiety in the past, which touch wood has been great for the last few years, but I've suffered with anxiety, I have ADHD, like my mental health is very affected by hormones. I know that I'm someone that will probably need support with my kids. And I think also seeing the relationship that my niece and nephew have with all their immediate family, I would like my kids to have the same. I'd like them to grow up with that. And that, up until the last couple of years, that's never really been important to me. Like, I was never, again, I don't know if this makes me sound like a complete arsehole, but I was never the family is everything person.
No judgment.
I know a lot of people say that, like, family is the one thing, like, they're everything. And that was never me. I was like, I've got a great family, I love them to bits, but also my life is everything. I want to go and do whatever I want to do. I don't want to be tired. But now I'm older, and the prospect of bringing kids into the world, I think I'd want them to have those relationships, and I think I would need the support. However, I would definitely travel with kids. Whereas my brother and his wife are very much like, we're not taking the kids abroad until the youngest one's 5. They don't want to travel. And they're also not travelers anyway. They're much more, let's go to a resort for a week kind of people. I am very much like, I want to take my kids out. I mean, it's free on planes when they're under 2. So why would you not just take advantage of the free travel for the kids? I would very much like to show my kids the world.
Travel math right there, that was.
Right? The kid's free, so let's just go away for a while. I would happily like take them away and like live in different places for like a month or 3 months or something like that, because I know how much I gained from exploring the world. I would want my kids to experience that as well. Not from a necessarily like seeing beautiful places, but a lot of my open-mindedness, a lot of the way that I look at the world, a lot of even like my political views changed because I travelled, because I wasn't surrounded by people who only thought the same thing and whose parents thought the same thing and whose parents thought the same thing there. Like, travelling opened my mind and just changed me entirely as a person. And I like to think that I will raise children with the same open-mindedness, with the same ability to think for themselves. I don't need my kids to grow up exactly the same as me. Challenge me, have your own views, tell me this is something that you believe and that's something you believe, and then tell me why. I'm curious. I want to raise individuals who aren't just a carbon copy of me. I don't know, I feel like this has got really deep, but I feel like sometimes I think where, or like the type of person I would be now if I had never left my hometown ever. And it actually makes me feel quite sick, because I feel like I would have just, as I said, I would never have thought for myself. I would have adopted everybody else's beliefs and stuck with them. And I don't agree with a lot of beliefs around here.
I appreciate being able to have deep conversations with yourself, for example, because I think there are a lot more of us who think similar than we think.
Yeah.
And there's almost like not enough people saying it. So, and what I've found, you had this as well growing up, it was always, so when you're having kids, okay, so you're going to graduate, when you're having kids, when you're getting a house, when you're getting married. And it was always like, I'm 21, I've got time, are you for real? Even the nomad remote work space, for the first couple of years, I was still coming up against this, but when you're going to settle down and have kids? And I was like, do you know what? I've just got to get comfortable with being like the cool auntie who travels, right? Because I'm sorry, why do I have to choose? And then, of course, nomadic families started popping up, and it was kind of like, okay, this is how it can work if you're full-time nomadic. But I want to also know, and I think it's a great conversation to have, there's nothing wrong with having a base and building your life while still having remote business. I think there are so many different ways to do it. And maybe it is that you have a base in the UK, but you educate them online, and like, who knows what's going to be available once like you decide to have kids, right? Because... And I think that made for me as well, and I'm sure there'll probably be people listening who are thinking, oh, okay, like there are different thought processes around this. I don't have to be one or the other. Like full-time nomadic and we never like go home and we live out of one suitcase versus having a base that you stay in for 20 years. And I think it's just such a good conversation to have, which is why I wanted to just preface it with, I hope it's not like a problem to ask. But it is one of those things though that I get a lot of people saying like, thank you for talking about that. Because it makes it okay. I
think outside of the remote life, you get the criticism for like not being married, not settling down, being single in your 30s, not having kids. It's like, why aren't you doing these things? And then when you go into like the remote life, I feel like it's the opposite. You get, or like specifically digital nomads, you get the opposite. It's almost like you get the criticism for deciding you want a base, for deciding you're not traveling every 5 minutes. It's like you can never win. And I've got to the point now where like I'm so comfortable with who I am. I've got myself to a place where I'm so happy with me. I'm happy with the life that I've created for myself. It's not glamorous. It's not what would look good on Instagram. I've chosen to stay living with my mum because I like this house. I enjoy being with her. As I said, it's not glamorous. I've received so much hate for my decision to stay single, to not have children yet, to live with my mum. Like, but I don't really care now. These are my decisions. This is my life. Why am I going to turn my life into something just because other people are telling me to live that way? I think you just have to do what feels good to you. And as we've said, like, that evolves so much. Like, when someone asked you about, when are you settling down? I remember being 20, where was I? It was when I was living in Australia. So I think I was 23, and I went on a date with this guy, and he was 22, he was a year younger than me. And we went on this date, and I was like, oh, I'd lived in Thailand and I've been in Melbourne for 6 months. I think he was Australian. And he said to me on the date, yeah, but when are you going to get married and settle? And I was like,
boo.
I'm 23 years old. Like, I'm 33 and I don't want to get married and settle down. Like, what are you talking about? And in that moment, I was just like, yeah, no, you're not. You're definitely not someone that I'm going to want to see again.
And I feel like I need to put a quick disclaimer as always in here. Like, there's nothing wrong with having kids and quote unquote settling down, like when you are in your early 20s. But it is so funny how there is still this sort of cookie cutter, everyone's sort of being judged by the same milestones when those milestones look so different. Yeah. Like, when people say, oh, when you're going to have kids to me, I kind of want to retaliate with, what makes you think I can have kids? Like, I know that's a really charged question, but it's so funny to me how that is still such a big milestone for people that they judge you against. I don't get it. Like, there's nothing wrong with how you want to live your life like that way. But that's why I loved having these conversations, because again, it's just sort of sharing with people and sort of making it okay to choose your lifestyle, because that's what it is ultimately. It's about being able to choose your lifestyle, not I want to throw everything to the wind and go travel. That's just one version of it.
100%. And I also think, like, if I'd have had kids in my 20s, I wasn't emotionally mature enough. Like, I've done a lot of therapy and a lot of coaching over the past few years. And even now, like, if I was to have a kid tomorrow, I'd still be like, I mean, I know, I'm sure every parent thinks this, that they're not ready, but I still feel like I've got that little bit more work to do before I'm able to have a child and raise them how I want them to be raised. I was so young in my 20s. I was definitely, I don't want to say selfish, because it was my life. So, like, you're entitled to live your life the way that you want to. But I feel like if I'd had them in my 20s, I would have had to sacrifice everything. And that would have created resent for the child. And you can't have a child and then resent it. Like, it's not their fault. It's like your responsibility that you've brought this child into the world. So I don't feel like there's any right for you to resent them. And I would never want to be in that position where I had a child without it being a decision that I make. It's literally only been in the last 6 months where I've known for certain I want to have kids. Like, up until that point, I was very like, I'm not sure. Like, I love being an auntie. I love being the traveling auntie, like, runs her own business, like that kind of thing. Yeah. And I was very, very happy to just stay an auntie. And it's really, been in like the last 6 months that I'm like, no, I would like kids, to the point where now I think in a couple of years' time, if I hadn't met the right person that I would want to have kids with, if I had the ability to, I'd probably have them by myself.
I love that. Again, there's no one size fits all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whatever works for you, works for you. And I was actually curious to know if you've had that conversation, because I know for myself, especially after I was being asked in nomadic spaces, what are you going to do when you settle down? I was like, but I moved into this industry because I didn't want to have to think like that. And I know I had a bit of an existential crisis moment where I was like, okay, am I going to have to choose between both? And can I be okay being cool Auntie Han? Like, it was a real confronting moment. And then I realised, just as you were saying, I would say family has kind of always been a priority in the back of my mind, but like, it was always in the back of my mind until the last couple of years. So yeah, when I reached my 30s, basically. And then it was that moment where you kind of had to realize, okay, what am I okay with? Will I be okay without kids? Can dogs be my like fur babies forever? Could I do this by myself? And I honestly had the exact same thought process as you. It was, okay, I don't feel like I'm fully secure financially. And just as you said, I'm sure there are parents out there who think, you will never be ready. But 100%, I feel like there is just that sort of internal gut feeling of, after like a couple of years, stuff can happen. It's fine. Like, I would be okay.
I also think as well, like, there's so much more evidence now. Like, of women older having kids, like late 30s, early 40s, even like 50s. I'm not saying I'd want to wait till 50 because there is like this obviously biological thing that we have to worry about, but there's so much more evidence of women doing it later. Whereas I suppose when we was younger, it was always you have kids and you get married in your 20s, that's what you do. And now I'm like, no, I want to live my life to the point where now I'm like, okay, I'm ready to bring someone else into it so that I can give them my attention and focus that they deserve. And that's what I like to do. When people tell me, like, as I said, I've had a lot of hate online recently about like because I started a new Instagram account for my business, and I shared a reel about the fact that I thought I'd be engaged by the time I was 30, and then I went through a breakup when I was 29, and I was dating someone at the start of this year, and then I ended things. And the way that I'd worded it was he was like the kindest guy I dated, because he was very kind to me, but that was about the only thing that was compatible for us. So I ended things, and all the men I say all the men on the internet, a lot of men on the internet like absolutely hated it, because there's this good guy entitlement, I feel like, where if someone's a good guy, then you're not allowed to dump them, despite the fact that they're not compatible with you in any way, shape or form. So I received like hundreds and hundreds of comments telling me that like I'm going to die alone, surrounded by cats, like my eggs are dried up, I'm never going to be able to have kids, I'm delusional, all this stuff. And when those things happen, what I do and what I actually share with my clients to do is to like look for evidence of the opposite. And that's what I've started to do. Like I look at all the people who have had kids in their late 30s, have had kids in their 40s, have done it on their own, and who have got to that point where then they're ready to settle down. And I'm like, well, if they can do it, why can't I? And I'm not so attached to me needing to be the one to carry the child. If it gets to the point where it's my late 30s or 40s and I can't have kids, I am not closed off to adoption. So I feel like I can still, I mean, obviously I'm 33, I'm saying all this, I don't know what life has got in store for me, but I feel like I've got options, and I feel like I don't have to. I think this is one of the biggest problems as well, is when everyone tells you and like scares you into this idea that time is running out and you have to do things now, or you're like a failure to society, or you're just never gonna get that. I feel like that's when people like rush into relationships or rushing to having children with people that they don't actually like, but just so that their clock doesn't run out. And that's like a whole other topic, because I feel like that's so like unhealthy for everyone involved.
One other thing to add on to your point, sorry, I had like several. I was thinking like, I also think we need to like stop saying that you're going to die alone with cats is a bad thing. Like, do you know how many people I've seen on TikTok happy with their cats? No. Like, for real, cats are great.
I mean, like, I'm allergic to cats, so I'll just die alone with dogs, so that's fine. But also, like, I've seen that nowadays, like, there's an account on Instagram called Retirement House, and it's just loads of like people in their 80s and 90s living their best life as friends. And I'm like, I'm open to that as well. Yes, having a husband, having a partner that you can go through life with would be amazing, but it's not something that I need to be happy, because I've got a very fulfilled life. I'm very content with the life that I've created for myself, and I would now need someone very, very special to come into it. And I look at some of those accounts and I'm just like, maybe I want to be the 80-year-old grandma that's just like, well, probably not grandma if I haven't met someone, or I don't know, but maybe I want to be like that 80-year-old woman that's sat by a pool all day, like sipping wine or doing TikTok challenges or whatever. Like, whatever happens, my life is going to be great because I'm going to create it that way. So husband or no husband, it'll be fine.
I joked to someone once that I was like, you know, if all else fails, like air quotes, I was like, I'm going to get a little ranch on the middle of an olive tree field and just invite a bunch of friends around. And they were like, oh my gosh, Han, that's my literal dream too. And I was like, well, there we go. Like, we've got to round up a few people together, because I think that's also it. There is so much more support online as well now, that we can actually create so many more groups and supports. You don't need to necessarily have that 2.4 children, married, house with the white picket fence lifestyle to make a family work. Like there's always that saying, isn't it, as well, that friends are the family you choose. So I think there's just all these different conversations that just we need to share more. I think that's what it is. We need to be sharing more of this, because I think there are so many more people who think similar to us, I think, that And I'm sorry, if the kids or us or whatever, if we turn out all right, then what's the problem?
Yes.
What's really the problem? Like, the aesthetics might look different, but what's the problem?
I agree. And I think that people struggle with it because this is so new, this way of thinking. And I say new, like probably, I want to say maybe like last 20-ish years, like this idea, especially as women, that we don't have to live that life. Like, we have so many opportunities. We can work for ourselves. We don't need husbands. We don't need to have kids if we don't want to have kids. There are so many different ways that we can live our lives nowadays compared to what there used to be like 40, 50, 60 years ago, like hundreds of years ago. We've got so many opportunities, and there's still that mentality for a lot of people where it is like, but this is how it's always been done, so this is how it should be done. And I think that's why it's hard to open up when we have these conversations. I mean, I don't really care what other people think of my thoughts on this, which is why I am so open about it. But I know for a lot of people, if they shared how they really felt about things and they received the levels of criticism and hate that I had, it would completely destroy them. It would, like, waking up to hundreds of comments every day, being told that your parents should have been child-free, things like that, it can really impact you just because you have these beliefs around not settling in a marriage. Very different to settling down and being in a family. I'm talking about settling with someone that you don't actually want to be with just because that's what's expected of you from these decades of beliefs. One thing that I wanted to say as well is I've been very lucky to be surrounded by people. So my nan's sister, my great aunt, she's very close to us as well. She got divorced, I think it was like, she must have been in her 40s maybe. It was when I was a kid. But now she's spent the last 30 years living alone as a single woman. She's never dated again. She's never looked for another husband. She's got an incredible life. She's got tons of friends. She's always doing something. She's always going somewhere. And I think having witnessed her as a role model, my mum never remarried after her and my dad split up, and I've seen the life that she's created for herself and how content she is on her own. I think for me, having those role models and seeing you don't need a man, you don't need a marriage, you don't need to have kids to be happy and to live a fulfilled life has really made me question what I want from my own life and really made me look at my life and go, okay, what is going to make me happy? And yeah, I would like kids someday. The ideal would be to be married and have a family, but I'm not so attached to that my life has to look like that. So yeah, I think having that evidence that there are multiple ways to live your life is great.
Honestly, I keep feeling like there's so many more bits and pieces that I want to keep hearing from and I keep on joking about. But I'm also worried that obviously we are significantly into the podcast and I've not actually asked you yet really about your businesses. So obviously I feel like you had one separate business when we were in 2017. It sort of evolved, and then obviously you contributed an amazing blog post to the Remote Life when we first started, so thank you for that. Do you want to just tell us what has maybe changed since that blog post in 2021 and where you're at now?
Yeah, definitely. So I started as a social media manager and then moved into coaching social media managers specifically on their pricing, and I think that's where I was when I wrote that blog post all about pricing with confidence. And I created the Price with Confidence podcast, which was just a series of 13 podcast episodes. It was very specifically to help social media managers price their services, but I think a lot of the advice in there would be applicable to other freelancers as well. And then around 2022, I was still doing social media management as well, but only for clients that were kind of referred to me. I didn't market myself as a social media manager. And I worked with a couple of clients then. And then I just moved away from that and really wanted to focus on confidence coaching because that's what really lights me up. That's what gets me excited because I'm someone, so obviously I've talked about the fact that I travel a lot. I traveled a lot when I was younger as well. But prior to me going on that first trip, I was someone that was too afraid to leave the house. So I had serious anxiety, I had IBS, I used to get panic attacks all the time. I wouldn't get on trains, I would never get on buses, I couldn't go anywhere without my mum being with me. For a couple of years, I very much didn't leave my house at all until I hit this point where I was nearly fired from my job and my boss was just like, if you call in sick, you're not going to have a job anymore. And in that moment was when I decided to say yes to everything that scared me and really transform my own mindset before it became like a trend. So this was like back in 2011, 2012. And within the space of that year, I dramatically increased my confidence to get me to the point where I could travel on my own. So that first trip to Bangkok, first trip to Thailand, that was a completely solo trip. I travelled around Thailand for a little while and then settled on Koh Tao and lived there for a year. And I would never have been able to do that if I hadn't transformed my own mindset and increased my own confidence. Likewise, I never would have started my business. I never would have, as I said, traveled. I never would have increased my prices. Like, confidence to me is what has attributed to the life that I've got now. And I want to ensure that other people create those levels of confidence as well, so that they can live the life that they deserve. So very much for the last couple of years, my core focus is as a confidence coach. And that can be anything from helping someone through a breakup, helping them rebuild their self-confidence after a breakup. I went through a pretty traumatic breakup in 2019 and essentially had to build myself back up from ground zero. So yeah, helping people with their dating. I've now got a podcast as well. I've got the Confidence Show, which I think I had back in 21. And I've also got the Date with Confidence podcast, which helps people to date confidently, especially if they've not dated for a long time, which again was me. It took me a couple of years to get back into dating after my last breakup because it was a lot to have to deal with. And yeah, whether it's in their business or just confidence in general, which sounds so broad. And another area that I'm really specifically focusing on at the moment is people in their 30s, because I feel like once you hit your 30s, there's something about it, especially this kind of ties in a lot with what we've talked about. There's this pressure of the marriage, the kids, the buying the house. It's like your 20s, like it's fine to travel the world and have fun and party every night and do whatever. And you're expected to almost be carefree. And then the second you turn 30, it's like, well, why aren't you married? Why don't you have kids? Why don't you have a house? And it's like, but how am I supposed to have all those things when my 20s, I got to live this carefree life, and now you're expecting me overnight to have these things that society tell me I'm not successful if I don't have those things. So definitely helping people feel confident in their 30s and get rid of this idea that you are behind if you don't have those things, or that you are not enough if you are single or child-free. And then aside from the coaching, I manage a podcast for someone and edit that. I also do social media management. I do like 1 to 2 days a month where I just do 1 day of content creation for a client. So that kind of keeps me going as well. And then, yeah, I'd like to get to the point where I monetize my Instagram, my ads on my website, monetize the podcast, all that kind of thing. So I do a lot of different things now, but the confidence coaching is the main thing because it's what I'm most excited about.
Multi-passionate human.
Yeah, exactly that. Multi-passionate. And as well, like I discovered a couple of years ago, I think this was actually in 2022. I'm still waiting for the appointment from the doctor, but I'm pretty sure I've got ADHD, which makes so much sense. It's made my entire life make sense, to be perfectly honest. And because like I can't just do the one thing, I need to be able to jump around. And not only that, doing the multiple things means I've got the multiple income streams. So if one thing is a bit slow one month, I don't have to fall into that stress and panic of, oh my God, I can't pay my bills. Affiliate income is also something that I have as well. So yeah, I do lots of things.
I was also curious, have you ever done your human design?
Yeah.
As well.
I have, and I am a projector, which is why I need a lot of rest.
I love that because I'm a manifesting generator, and I was like, I have all these ideas that I want to do, and so I was wondering. I think also, especially after the pandemic, you were saying about multiple income streams, and I think the pandemic was a huge moment for a lot of people, I think, where we thought, right, if anything can happen, we never thought we'd have the rainy day, or like where anything can literally happen and the world shuts down. So I think having those different multiple income streams is so important in itself, and it makes total sense. I was curious though, obviously you've pivoted a couple times. Would you call it pivoting, or is it just honing, I guess, what your messaging at the end of the day? Because that's how I feel. But was there ever a moment where you thought perhaps it's time to pivot, or this isn't quite sitting right, or when it came to your business?
Yeah, a few times. I really think it's just down to like the evolution of us as human beings. Like, I've changed so much since I initially started my business. Social media has changed so much since I started as a social media manager. Like, when I started social media management, Instagram was literally just feed posts, and now we've got so many different tools. I think there were a few times I've always wanted to do the confidence coaching. Even when I started as a social media manager, I'd been doing that for about a year, and I'd heard about like life coaching. And I remember saying to my boyfriend at the time, I'm like, there is just something in me that is like, this is what you were meant to do. And he was just like, you can't be a life coach at 27. I was like, oh, I hate it when people tell me I can't do something, because then I'm like, well, watch me do it. Like, oh, so I was like, okay.
Beat my dust.
And that very much went into that confidence coaching. I worked with a few business coaches, and they were like, you need to have a niche. It needs to be really, really specific. So I was like, okay, well, confidence coaching, I was a social media manager, maybe I'll coach social media managers. And that was great, because helping it was mostly women, but I did work with some men, but helping them raise their prices and get paid what they actually deserved to be paid was so rewarding. Because some of them, like one of the first clients I worked with, she had 37 clients when we worked together and was charging £50 a month to do each profile, which is insane. You know the amount of work that goes into social media. Now she charges something like £600 a day. I think even more than that now. But when we first worked together, it was so low. And seeing her growth now, like we're actually really good friends now, but seeing her growth and working with other clients who unapologetically realised, okay, I actually do deserve to be paid more. Like, that was so rewarding. But there was still something missing. Like, general confidence is what I've always wanted to do. And what I've always been told is, confidence is too general. Nobody buys confidence. You need to be more specific. You need to niche down. Like, you need to focus on a tiny pool of people, because then that's where people will come. But again, don't tell me I can't do something. I don't want to just focus on like a tiny pool of people when I can help so many people. So I feel like the way that I do it now is with my messaging. Like, my messaging will be very specific to one thing, but it will all lead to the same offers and services, which are more kind of general confident stuff. But I think just having that inner knowing within me going, you need to change things. This isn't enough for you anymore. This isn't what you're supposed to be doing. Just listening to that was enough for me to go, okay, now we're pivoting, now we're changing. And I've been focusing on the confidence stuff specifically for like the last 2.5, 3 years. In 2023, I created the confidence course, which is like a self-paced course now. But then I created that, launched that, and then I lost my dog. So I feel like for the last year, I kind of essentially, which again, remote working, great. I essentially took a year off to grieve, because I just couldn't deal with it. I just couldn't cope with it. I'd never experienced grief before, and it was just horrendous. So this year I've very much been like, no, we're getting back into things. We're full steam ahead. And yeah, I'm really pleased with the momentum that's picked up this year. And I think that comes from, funnily enough, it actually comes from the confidence to be able to trust yourself and to trust your instinct above listening to what should be done or the generic advice or what other people are doing. And I think as long as you listen to yourself, that's when you're going to see the most success, as it were. And by success, I mean feel the most fulfilled and feel the happiest in what you're doing.
That was one thing that I remember reading, because again, in my early 20s, I was like, give me all the books to read, I want to learn. And I remember even back then, there was a book that mentioned about the fact that entrepreneurialism, so much of it, like that's why I talk about things like human design now, like The Artist's Way is one of the biggest like favourite books that always get brought up on the podcast, because it's all about getting in touch with your gut instinct. So much of being an entrepreneur, being a freelancer, it is about trusting your gut at the end of the day. You can have all the stats, you can have all the shoulds, you can have all the science to back up whatever, but if it doesn't feel right, you don't go with it as an entrepreneur. I think that doesn't get talked about as much, because again, it's a human thing that we've kind of been told to ignore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our guts are always talking to ourselves, and sometimes we can confuse it with maybe excitement or maybe anxiety or something else. And every single time, without fail, that I have ignored that feeling, something has gone wrong. I say gone wrong, like I don't believe in things going wrong. I believe in lessons that we're meant to learn.
No.
But it's not worked out how I expected, or I've gone through like a traumatic experience or a really difficult time because I ignored that feeling. So now I'm very much like, no, listen to I've turned down work, I've turned down big clients because my gut's been like, no, that's not for you. And I'd much rather be happy and feel good and, as I said, like content and fulfilled than take on a client or take on work just to make some money, when I know ultimately that's going to dramatically impact my mental health and my overall well-being.
There is so much that I really want to keep talking to you about, but I'm so wary of the fact that like we've been talking for a long time now about some amazing things. So I think what we'll do is maybe leave it for a possible part 2 at some point. I'm so happy that we did a podcast.
Me too.
I have one final question. So fill in the blank. Home is where?
I instantly want to go, home is where my laptop is. Home is where... That's a really good one to think about. I don't know how to answer that really.
I'll lend you laptop.
Lend you that for now, and that's a really good thing for me to think about, because home right now is like here, and this has always been my home, like when I was a child. But I think maybe like I'm just my home. Maybe that's just it.
No, there's no just. There's no just.
Yeah, true. Maybe I'm my home. Maybe that's it.
We'll leave that to her for a ponder. But Rebecca, it's been so amazing to chat. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've really, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Remote Life. And thank you, Rebecca, for taking the time to speak with us. You can find links to Rebecca's profiles below. Thank you so much again for listening, and we can't wait to remote work with you again soon.